The announcements were promising.
Te 100 dni.
These 100 days and 100 specifics will lead to the fact that people in Poland will have more in their pockets. It will be cheaper in Polish stores, and it will be better in every Polish home. In practice, all Poles will soon have to dig deeper into their pockets, because as of the 1st of July, gas prices will rise by up to 60%, and electricity will also become more expensive, as the new Civic Coalition government abandons the shielding measure, that is, the lower prices introduced by the previous government. These high bills that people will soon be paying for electricity and gas are the result of these regulations that were adopted in the European Union, in the European Parliament. The Green Deal is a scam, a misery, and it has to stop. Poles are to be relieved by a one-time energy voucher. However, the support will only go to households whose income in 2023 did not exceed 2,500 zloty per person in a single-person household or 1,700 zloty per person in a multi-person household. The bill shows that, for example, a single senior citizen with an average pension or a married couple with a child earning the national minimum wage will not receive support. Energy grant income criterion: up to 2,500 zloty in a single-person household, up to 1,700 zloty in a multi-person household. The lowest pension from March 2024, 1,780 zloty 96 gross. Average pension in Poland in 2024, 3,482 zloty 63 grosze gross. Minimum wage in 2024, 4,300 zloty gross.
Biorąc pod uwagę koszty tej ustawy,
Taking into account the cost of this law, the cost will still be large because it will be about 8,200,000,000 zloty, looking only at the end of this year. It should be emphasized that this is an energy crisis at our own request.
gdy patrzymy na tylko i wyłącznie końcówkę tego roku.
The country's largest natural gas supply, PGNiG Obrót Detaliczny, has sent out letters to its customers announcing gas price increases in the second half of the year. High gas and electricity prices will in turn translate into increases in other industries such as construction, industry and agriculture. In connection with Ursula von der Leyen's visit to Poland, there have been protests by farmers. On the 10th of May in Warsaw, the NSZZ Solidarity will protest against the Green Deal, which contributes significantly to the fact that we pay more for energy.
Pod hasłem precz.
Under the slogan, Down with the Green Deal, a demonstration organised by the NSZZ Solidarity and the NSZZ Solidarity of Individual Farmers, but which applies to all Poles, so every Pole interested in the Green Deal issues or financial issues, and it applies to all Poles who do not want to pay for the absurd climate policy.
Finansów.
We cordially invite you to join us this Friday, the 10th of May at 12 noon local time, Castle Square in Warsaw. The Green Deal is being pushed by the European Union. The goal is to achieve climate neutrality in Europe by 2050 at the expense of farmers, who are having restrictions imposed on crops and livestock, and all residents, because we will have to comply with the requirements of the Buildings Directive, which will exceed the financial capacity of many household budgets. Natalia Jeczniczak, TV Republika. Recent months have definitely been a difficult time for Polish infrastructure investments. Now news has emerged of a possible multi-year delay in Poland's nuclear program. All this after a statement by the Industry Minister, Marzena Czarnecka, who announced the completion of the first nuclear power plant only in 2039. After a wave of criticism, the minister rushed to clarify. There is no communication chaos about the schedule of the Polish nuclear power plant. 2028, pouring of the first nuclear concrete. 2035, electricity from the first unit. 2039, more units and completion. Definitely, transportation is not the strong point of Donald Tusk's ministers. Chaos also reigns over another key investment. The new president of the Central Transportation Port is for and even against the creation of the investment. The fact is that the concrete actions of the current government prove, at the very least, the suspension of the work on the Central Transportation Port. This should certainly not be a vanity project, the largest and most impressive airport in this part of Europe. The project, as we see it, is supposed to respond to a specific need, to provide transportation capacity in Poland. It is not meant to be an end in itself with its dignitary and political connotations. If anyone is trying to politicise the Central Transportation Port, it is the current ruling team. Polls show that support for the project is cross-party. Meanwhile, one gets the impression that Donald Tusk's government and its appointees are looking for pretexts not to finish the investment. First of all, we can't open a new airport too early when Okęcie and Modlin will still have unused capacity, which will be increased by new investment. It makes no sense to build infrastructure when the existing infrastructure has not been fully utilised and has not had time to depreciate. This communication reflects the state of the project management. Even in the interview mentioned here, Mr. New Chairman of the Central Transportation Port contradicts himself or says things that contradict what the plenipotentiary says. For example, we hear we need to expand Chopin Airport because we won't have time to build the new Central Transportation Port, followed by a sentence further on that what we need to specifically delay is the construction of the Central Transportation Port so that this expansion can take place and pay for itself.
Argumenty przeciwników stają się
increasingly
coraz bardziej
absurd.
absurdalne.
Roman Giertych of the Civic Coalition claims that the Russians are responsible for building a movement of support for the Central Transportation Port, including an airport to enable the rapid transport of American troops to Poland. A slightly more rancorous record has been turned on by Ryszard Petru, who claims that Poland cannot afford a central transportation port and the simultaneous development of regional airports. There is always limited money. You know, it's easy to say, do something for 200 billion zloty, but the money is not there, and there won't be, presses on the lips. We have already heard that such a narrative once in the context of the 500 Plus programme. What happened next? We all remember. In the case of the Central Transportation Port, the cost of the entire programme, so not only the airport but also the railways until 2030, on the side of the state budget, is 70-something billion zloty, so statistically about 10 billion zloty a year, and the state budget is currently more than 800 billion, so that's a little over 1% of spending. At the end of the day, when someone says that we can't afford the Central Transportation Port, it's like saying we can't afford to make money. This is absurd. Since the Central Transportation Port is gigantomania, maybe Poles should lower their expectations, especially since one Central Transportation Port has already been built, the Central Pedestrian Bridge in Warsaw. More than 450 metres long, if necessary, it can serve as a runway, for light aircraft, for example. Maciej Strug, TV Republika. Polish and Allied military fighters tonight had to be picked up again due to increased Russian shelling of Ukraine right on the border of NATO airspace. Tonight, intensive long-range aviation activity of the Russian Federation is observed, related to missile strikes carried out against facilities located on Ukrainian territory. Russian missiles and suicide drones once again fell on a sleep-deprived Ukraine, on civilian facilities and critical infrastructure in 6 regions, just across the Polish border. At the same time, across our eastern border, on the territory of the Union of Russia and Belarus, the spectacle continues. Alexander Lukashenko, subordinate to Russia, the satrap of Belarus, is testing the possibility of launching tactical nuclear weapons, this time so that everyone can see the power of the Union of Russia and Belarus. This is a warning to the West not to cross the red line in helping Ukraine, while there is no real threat of some kind of nuclear conflict breaking out, because in fact these exercises are quite routine. What Russia doesn't want to show, either externally or internally, is the level of loss of life and equipment during the aggression against Ukraine, where Putin may have lost close to 500,000 troops. The Russians do not publish data on their own losses. They don't publish for the reason that otherwise they would have to admit and deny their own propaganda, that this is no longer a special military operation, although of course it never was, but simply an aggressive war with heavy human and equipment losses. Independent investigative journalists grouped in organizations such as Bellingcat have been counting the equipment destroyed in Ukraine since the beginning of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. According to Jakub Janowski, a member of Bellingcat and author of the Oryx blog, Russian losses in heavy equipment alone have already exceeded 15,000 pieces.
It's a complete set of equipment losses for which we have visual evidence, with exception of few cases where, for example, official confirmation was provided despite no visual confirmation.
According to the British Ministry of Defence, the average daily number of Russian war casualties, taking into account those killed and wounded, in 2024 was on average close to 900 people. The Russians are throwing waves of people around like a meat grinder. This is due to the tactics of the Russians have been using for many months, namely throwing so-called cannon fodder in successive attacks on fortified Ukrainian positions. The Russians, as in all previous wars, have no regard for human life. According to confirmed data by the British BBC television, more than 50,000 Russians may have been killed during the aggression against Ukraine. We are only talking about those killed who have been found and have their burial places.
w interesie Polski.
In the interest of Poland, it is in our interest for the Russians to derail in Ukraine and to suffer the greatest possible human and equipment losses there.
Żeby tam ponieśli.
That is why today, as before, it is important to have the West's continued support for Ukraine's armed forces. This gives Poland time to strengthen its defences and better prepare the Polish armed forces. The only question is whether Donald Tusk's government, which has its eyes set on Germany, will know how to use this time. Radosław Jankiewicz, Telewizja Republika. Polls opened in North Macedonia on Wednesday in parliamentary and presidential elections, in which the right-wing opposition is expected to gain ground against a ruling party that has failed to progress talks to join the European Union and to stamp out corruption. No polls have been published ahead of the vote, but a stronger than expected showing from the opposition VMRO-DPMNE party in the first round of presidential elections last month suggests that voters are frustrated with the ruling Social Democrats. Some of those who voted said they wanted a government capable of bringing in investments and rooting out corruption. I am expecting changes for the better because so far it has been rock bottom. It is surely going to get better. What are you generally dissatisfied with? I am dissatisfied with everything. There is nothing that is good. Everything is disastrous. Corruption in the first place. Everything related with the judiciary. Even some African countries are better. Though I believe there is always room for improvement, I wouldn't make any changes right now. We've had both better and worse times. I know for worse and I know for better. But the situation is calm. That's what I can say as a young citizen. We are mostly dissatisfied with the economic situation in the country. Low wages, disarray in institutions. This is what troubles this country most. Wednesday's vote includes a runoff for the more ceremonial presidency and for parliamentary seats. Polls open at 7 a.m. local time and will close at 7 p.m. local time. The State Election Commission is expected to start announcing the results from the 3,360 polling stations late on Wednesday. In 2001, NATO pulled North Macedonia back from the brink of civil war during an ethnic Albanian insurgency and promised faster integration into the European Union and NATO. Albanians account for about a quarter of the country's population of 1.83 million. North Macedonia joined NATO in 2020, but has made little progress with the EU integration, in part because of opposition from EU members Greece and Bulgaria.